I should have known something was off the moment her aunt looked at me like she'd already finished a story I hadn't even started yet. Not the polite kind of recognition, the other kind. The kind where someone's face says, "Oh, so you're the one." Her name was Sloane. No, wait. Sorry. Her name was Iris. And for almost 5 years, Iris had been the person I measured every other person against, without ever admitting that's what I was doing. We met because of a broken elevator. I'd just moved into a new apartment in Chicago, the kind of place that looks great in the listing photos and then has one working elevator for 8 floors. I was waiting on the ground level with 2 boxes of kitchen stuff and a growing suspicion I'd made a terrible life decision when she walked in carrying a lamp that was clearly too tall for her to see over. "You can't actually see where you're going," I said. "I can see fine," she said, from somewhere behind the lamp. "You just walked into the mailboxes." A pause. That was intentional. I took the top half of the lamp. She didn't argue. We rode up to the 4th floor together and discovered we were neighbors. Me in 4B, her in 4D, and by the time I figured out where I'd put my kettle, she'd already knocked on my door to borrow coffee because she'd packed hers too well and didn't want to dig for it. That was Iris. She had a very specific kind of confidence that came from being wrong often and unbothered by it. She was funny in a way that crept up on you, the sort of person who could say something completely straight-faced and make you question whether you were the one missing the joke. She was also, I noticed very quickly, the first person I wanted to talk to after anything happened. Good shift at work, bad shift at work, strange encounter on the L train. Didn't matter. Iris was the default. We became the kind of friends who had standing plans without making them. Sunday farmers market, because she liked the bread and I liked having somewhere to walk. Tuesday night takeout, because neither of us felt like cooking, and we'd figured out a rotation that covered most of what we wanted without anybody having to make a decision. She kept a spare key to my apartment because I'd locked myself out twice in the first 6 months, and she found that unacceptable. I, of course, was not examining any of this too closely. I was good at that, at taking something that was clearly significant and filing it under friendship and moving on. I had reasons. Iris was the most stable part of my day-to-day life in a city I was still figuring out, and I had watched enough of my own relationships go sideways to know that naming things wrong could cost you everything. So I didn't name it. I just kept showing up, and she kept being the person I looked for in every room, and we both apparently agreed without ever discussing it that this was fine. It was fine for a long time. Her family was from Cincinnati, and every summer her parents rented a lakehouse in Michigan for about 10 days in July. I had heard about this lakehouse the way you hear about something that exists in another person's life but not yours. She'd mention it in passing, send a picture of the dock, describe some argument with her brother about canoe rights. I had a complete mental image of a place I'd never been. Last July, she invited me. "Come for the weekend," she said, on a Tuesday in June. Handing me a container of leftover pasta like this was a casual offer and not a significant development. My parents like having people. My Aunt Cheryl will be there and she will absolutely try to feed you until you can't move. Just so you know. Is that a warning or a selling point? Both. So I said yes. I said yes the way I always did with Iris, without examining what it meant that I wanted to go, or what it meant that she'd ask me and not someone else, or what it meant that by the time that Tuesday ended, I was already looking up the drive time from Chicago to the lake. About 4 hours, for reference. Her family was exactly what I expected, which is to say I liked them immediately and felt slightly embarrassed about how much. Her dad, Doug, had the energy of a man who had been waiting for someone to argue with about grilling methods and was relieved I showed up. Her mom, Sandra, had the particular warmth of a woman who had been watching her daughter for years and had arrived at conclusions she was too polite to share out loud. I recognized the look, or maybe I didn't. Maybe I was just noticing it later. Her brother Owen was there, not the one from the file, different Owen, her brother, with his girlfriend, and they were both easygoing and didn't make a thing out of me being there the way I was half afraid they might. And there was Aunt Cheryl, who was Sandra's sister, and who looked at me on the first evening with an expression I filed under friendly and didn't revisit. I should have revisited it. The first 2 days were easy. We took the kayaks out in the morning. Iris burned her arm on the oven and blamed me for distracting her, even though I was in a different room. Her brother and I figured out we had the same opinion about a basketball team we both disliked, which Sandra said was going to be a problem, and she wasn't wrong. I helped Doug with the grill, and he gave me unsolicited but extremely useful advice about a work situation I'd mentioned. And at some point on the second evening, I was sitting on the dock with a drink, watching the sun drop, and realized I had not once checked my phone in the last 4 hours. That almost never happened. Iris sat down next to me at some point. I don't remember when. She'd been there long enough that it felt like she'd always been there, which was something that happened with her. She had a way of arriving without fanfare. "You look relaxed," she said. "I am relaxed. That's almost unrecognizable on you." "I relax." She tilted her head like she was weighing that claim and finding it unconvincing. The water was very still. Something was splashing near the reeds on the other side. For a few minutes, neither of us said anything, which was also fine, which was the kind of fine that I was not examining. The third day is when it happened. Iris and her mom had gone into town in the morning for groceries. Owen and his girlfriend had taken the canoe out. Her dad was doing something with a hose, and the side of the house that I was deliberately not close enough to get recruited into. I was sitting at the picnic table on the back deck with a cup of coffee reading something. I wasn't actually reading when Aunt Cheryl came out with her own coffee and sat down across from me with the energy of someone who had been waiting for this specific moment. "She talks about you constantly," she said, approximately 4 seconds after sitting down, not meanly, very pleasantly, like she was remarking on the weather. I looked up from the thing I wasn't reading. "Iris," she clarified, like there might be another she. "I've heard about you for what, 4 years? 5? The neighbor. The one who fixed the lamp." She smiled. "I know about the lamp." I did not know what to do with my face. "She doesn't talk about people the way she talks about you," Cheryl continued, with the serene confidence of someone who had been waiting years to say this and had prepared. "I want you to understand I'm not saying this to make things weird. I'm saying it because I think you should know." From somewhere inside the house, the back door opened. Iris said, "We're back." The store was out of the good. And then she stepped onto the deck, saw my face, saw her aunt's face, and stopped moving entirely. The grocery bag crinkled once. Cheryl turned around and gave Iris the mildest smile I have ever seen a human being produce. "Hi, sweetheart. What did you say?" Iris said. It was not a question. "I was just getting to know your friend, Cheryl. We were having a very nice conversation." "Cheryl, he seems lovely." Iris put the grocery bag down on the deck railing very carefully, like she was making a deliberate choice not to throw it, and said, "I need a minute," and walked back inside. Cheryl watched her go, then looked at me over her coffee with the satisfied expression of a woman who had just done exactly what she's intended to do. "She'd want you to follow her," she said. "She won't say that, but she would." I sat there for another second, processing the fact that I had just had approximately 30 seconds of conversation that had rearranged the last 5 years of my life, and then I got up. I found Iris in the kitchen. She was standing with her back to me at the counter, both hands flat on the surface, staring at a fruit bowl like she was reading something important in it. "Hey," I said. "I'm going to need a second," she said, without turning around. "Take your time." She does that. She doesn't filter. She's been doing it since I was 12. She seems very confident in what she said. A pause. "Don't! I'm not doing anything. You have a tone. I just got information," I said. "I'm processing the information." Iris finally turned around. Her face was flushed, not from embarrassment exactly, more like she'd been caught mid-sentence and hadn't found the next word yet. She crossed her arms, not defensively, just like she needed something to hold on to. "How much did she say?" Iris asked. "That you talk about me constantly. That she's been hearing about me for years. That she knows about the lamp." Iris closed her eyes briefly. "The lamp is a perfectly normal thing to mention. Is it?" "I was telling a story about moving in." "You told a story about a lamp," I said, "to a woman in Cincinnati who then remembered it well enough to bring it up to me on a lake in Michigan." Iris opened her eyes. She looked at me for a second, and then she looked at the fruit bowl, and then she looked at me again. "She's very thorough," she said without much conviction. I didn't push. I stood in the kitchen doorway and waited because she wasn't done, and I could tell. And the thing about Iris was that she never needed prompting so much as space. She'd get there. She always got there. She unfolded her arms and reached for a glass on the dish rack, filled it with water, didn't drink it. Set it down. Okay, she said quietly. Fine. What do you want me to say? Nothing you don't want to say. She looked at me. That's a very easy thing to say. I mean it. You've been my neighbor for 5 years, she said. You're the person I call when something good happens. You're the first person I call when something bad happens. You basically know my family. She gestured vaguely at the house around us. You're here. I know, I said. I didn't invite random people to my family's lake house. I know. I don't even invite most of my actual friends to my family's lake house. Iris? What? I know. She stopped, looked at me differently. Since when? Since longer than I've been comfortable admitting. That landed somewhere. I watched her process it. The small shift in her expression, something that had been braced going slightly less so. Why didn't you say anything? She said, not accusatory, genuinely asking. Because you were the best part of my life, I said, and I didn't want to find out I was wrong about what this was. The safe version of being near you was better than the alternative. Iris stared at me for a moment. That, she said slowly, is the most exhausting thing I have ever heard. Probably. You have been my neighbor for 5 years. Yes, we have eaten dinner together, conservatively, 300 times. That's a generous estimate. I have a spare key to your apartment. You use it to return my mail. I use it because I want to, she said. Which was, I thought, somewhat obvious. I almost laughed. I didn't because she was still working through something, and she needed to finish. So what you're telling me, Iris said, is that we have both been doing this, separately for the better part of 5 years, and nobody said anything. That's accurate. And my Aunt Cheryl, who visits twice a year, figured it out before either of us. She seemed very prepared. Iris looked at the ceiling for a second. I moved to Chicago to start over, she said, mostly to herself. I was not expecting to accidentally build a life around someone who lived next door. Was it an accident? She looked back at me, less so as it went on. That was honest in a way that did something to me. There was no performance in it. Just the truth. The slightly tired, slightly relieved version of the truth that comes out when you've been holding something long enough that putting it down is more feeling than statement. The lamp thing, I said. She groaned. Can we not? You told your aunt about the lamp. It was a funny story. Did you tell her about the elevator? A beat. Possibly. Did you tell her about the coffee? Everyone borrows coffee. Iris. What? How long? She looked at me in a way that people look at things they've given up, pretending aren't true. Since the thunderstorm, she said. The thunderstorm. 7 months after we'd moved in, big Midwestern thing in October, the power went out for most of the building. I'd knocked on her door to make sure she was okay, and we'd ended up sitting on her floor for 3 hours, with a candle and a card game she hadn't finished explaining the rules to. And at some point she'd fallen asleep against my shoulder, and I hadn't moved because I didn't want to wake her up. I had thought about that evening a number of times, more than I'd been comfortable accounting for. That was 4 years ago, I said. Yes, you've been for 4 years. I wasn't going to just say it, she said, a little defensive and a little amused. You were my neighbor. You're still my neighbor. If it had gone wrong, I would have had to see you at the elevator every day, and then move, probably. The logistics were bad. They were bad for me too. And yet here we are. Courtesy of Cheryl. Iris pressed her mouth together to keep from smiling. Didn't fully work. She's going to be impossible about this. She seemed like she'd already planned for it. She has. She's been asking me about you for 2 years. I should have known she'd just handle it herself. She looked at me. She likes you, by the way. That's almost more alarming. She doesn't like most people this fast. I like her too. Don't tell her that. She'll get ideas. She already has ideas. Worse ideas. Iris uncrossed her arms. The kitchen was warm, and through the window I could see the dock in the water and Doug still doing something complicated with the hose. The whole house was just carrying on. Nobody had noticed, or maybe everyone had noticed, and was very quietly minding their own business, which, based on what I'd seen of this family, was also possible. Can I ask you something? I said. Probably. The Tuesday dinners. She tilted her head slightly. Did you like the food rotation? I said, or did you like having a reason to come over every week? Iris looked at me for a long second. The Thai place closed, she said. We had to rebuild the rotation. We didn't rebuild it. We just started ordering from the same Thai place across town. It was still the best option. Iris? What? You drove 20 minutes further for the same food. She didn't answer right away. Then, I didn't want to change the night. That was the real thing under all of it. Not dramatic. Just honest in the small, specific way that honest usually is. I stepped closer. Not dramatically. Just enough. I should have said something a long time ago, I told her. You're saying it now. I'm saying it late. She lifted one shoulder. Better than not at all. We were close enough now that I could hear Doug say something outside about water pressure. A boat went by somewhere on the lake. Iris looked at me in a way that I had seen before, but had trained myself not to read correctly, and this time I didn't talk myself out of it. You're the person I look forward to, I said. Every version of every day. Whatever I kept telling myself this was, it stopped being only that a long time ago. Iris didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Her face did the thing it did when she'd stopped bracing herself. The thing I'd seen 100 times and never let myself understand until right now. So I kissed her. Quietly in the kitchen, while Doug muttered about the hose, and something dripped in the dish rack, and Aunt Cheryl was definitely on the deck making a face we couldn't see. It felt like the most natural thing I had done in years. Like I had been taking a long route to something that was always going to end up here. When I pulled back, Iris stayed close. Well, she said, Cheryl's going to be unbearable. She kind of earned it. She's going to bring it up at Thanksgiving. Probably Christmas too. Every family dinner until one of us dies. Worth it, I said. Iris laughed once, quietly, and leaned her forehead against mine for a second. I really liked the Tuesday dinners, she said. I know. Even the weeks when the order was wrong. I know. Even when you forgot the spring rolls. I didn't forget them. I ordered them, and you ate them all before we sat down. She pulled back to give me a look. Those were communal spring rolls. That is not how spring rolls work. You should have been faster. I laughed. She was already laughing. And then we were just standing in her family's kitchen in Michigan in July. And the door opened, and Sandra called. From the deck that Doug needed a second opinion on something involving the propane line, and we both turned toward the door like normal people who had not just reorganized 5 years of their lives beside a fruit bowl. When we walked out, Cheryl looked up from her chair. She looked at Iris. She looked at me. She looked at our faces and apparently found all the information she needed because she set her coffee down with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had run a long game and won it and said nothing at all. Iris muttered, "She's the worst," I said. "She's my favorite person here." Iris elbowed me. "You just burned 2 years of goodwill. I'll rebuild." Doug's second opinion, for what it's worth, was about propane tank placement, and I genuinely had nothing useful to add. But I stood there nodding anyway, because sometimes you're just happy to be outside with people you like. In July, on a lake, when something that had been tangled up in you for a long time has finally come loose. Owen and his girlfriend got back from the canoe about 40 minutes later. Owen glanced between me and Iris once, did the math in about 2 seconds, and nodded slowly like someone confirmed. "Cool," he said, and went inside. That was it. No scene. No interrogation, no long conversation for everyone had to process out loud. Just the quiet, faintly embarrassing recognition that everyone had been waiting on the same conclusion and that I was the last one to find out. 3 weeks later, back in Chicago, I was standing at my door at 7:48 on a Tuesday evening with containers of takeout and the full understanding that the Thai place 20 minutes farther away was now permanently on the rotation. And that I wasn't going to pretend anymore that the dinner was about the food. Iris opened her door before I knocked. "I heard the elevator," she said. "You're on the 4th floor. I know your footsteps." That should be strange. She took the containers from me. When has anything we do been normal? She wasn't wrong. None of it had been particularly normal. It had just been ours, built over a broken elevator and a borrowed cup of coffee, and 4 years of Tuesday dinners and 1 October thunderstorm where neither of us had said a word, and both of us apparently remembered it forever. I followed her inside. She'd already set the table. My usual side, her usual side, same as always. Completely different, in a way I was going to be figuring out for a long time. And when I thought about what Cheryl had said on the deck, "I think you should know," I understood what she'd given me. Not the information. I think I'd already had that, tucked somewhere I hadn't been willing to look. She just handed me the reason to finally look. It turns out some things don't need to be complicated. They just need someone to say them out loud, in the right moment, over a cup of coffee on a lake in July. And sometimes that someone is your girlfriend's aunt who has been waiting 4 years to make her move, and who was, as it turned out, completely right about everything.